All right, guys. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to our call tonight. This, like I was mentioning to you before, I really would like for this to not be a lecture. I would like for it to be as interactive as possible. And so we've muted just because of the feedback. But as I ask questions, I'm going to, be quiet for a little while to allow you to unmute yourselves and to be able to share. As you guys saw, or you probably heard from your invitation, we're going to be going through Dr. A's Habits of Health book, this one right here, and the workbook. And we have a study guide that we're going to be going through. If you don't have that, please touch base with the person that invited you to make sure that you can follow along. Now, whether you have the books or not, you are absolutely welcome to join us. You're absolutely welcome to participate in all of the calls. I don't want you to ever feel like, oh, I didn't have a chance to read for this week, I can't join the call. Please, please, please feel free to join us, okay? Today we're going to be talking about habits, right? What is a habit? Basically, it's something that we do on autopilot, right? It's something that we do without really thinking about it. It becomes kind of automatic. And today I had two really awesome examples happen to me just in my life, because I was driving home and I thought I needed to stop by the grocery store and pick up some eggs. And so as I'm driving off of the highway, I mentioned to my friend sitting next to me, like, we're going to go to the grocery store. Now, to go to the grocery store, I had to turn left off the ramp. And to go home, I had to turn right off the ramp. I was literally finished telling her this, and I turned right off the ramp. I started going home, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm supposed to go to the grocery store. And that was just a great example of how habits work. I'm so used to turning off that ramp and making right to go home that I just did it on autopilot. So then I had to go and make a U-turn and then get back to the grocery store. Well, by the time I got there, my daughter was sleeping. And so I asked my friend if she'd be willing to watch her while I went into the grocery store, and she said that would be fine. So I stopped the car and turned off the car and started leaving with the keys in my hand. And in my head, I had thought, okay, if she's going to stay in the car, I'm going to leave the AC running, I'm going to leave music on so that they're not bored. I had thought that like 3 seconds before I turned the car off, and yet I still turned the car off, because it's the power of habit. You park the car, you take off your seatbelt, you take the key out of the ignition. And that's what a habit is. It's something that you do on autopilot, something you're not really thinking about. And the things that we do in terms of our health, they can either help our health or they can work against our health. So today what we want to talk about is, how do we recognize what a bad habit is? How do we create new habits? How do we break a negative habit chain? And how can we stop the bad or unhealthy habits? Okay? So this is an interaction point, so that you can get ready to unmute yourself. How do you define health? Anybody have a definition for health?
When you're able to do what you want to do.
When you're able to do what you want to do. I love that. Anybody else?
When you don't need medicine.
Okay, when you don't need medicine. Any other thoughts?
When I feel good.
I'm sorry?
When I feel good.
When you feel good. I love that. I love that too. A lot of times what I hear from people is being healthy is not being sick. But is not being sick the same as being healthy?
No.
No. So I love that definition. The first one, I'm not sure who gave us that one, was being able to do what you want to do. I love that. Feeling good, that's fabulous. Of course, not being sick is definitely a prerequisite, but not being sick doesn't mean that you're really, really healthy. And actually, there's a continuum of health, okay? You can either be sick, or you can be very unhealthy, or just simply unhealthy, or you can be healthy, you can be optimally healthy, or you can have ultra health. Okay, and what we want to talk about is, how can we move up this continuum? Wherever it is that you are, what is it that we can do to move on to the next step? Okay, now currently, 2/3 of Americans are either overweight or obese. Okay, and obesity is the #2 preventable cause of death, which literally means that people are dying because of the number on a scale. Okay. Now, 85% of people that go on a diet currently, they usually will regain their weight within 2 years. And the medical community is really, really focused on just fixing the consequences of the problem and not really fixing the problem. All of these statistics on the current reality, they seem a little bit bleak. Would you agree? I mean, you know, if 85% of people that go on a diet regain their weight and, you know, people are dying, you know, why bother trying? Why bother doing anything about it? Okay, so how can we change that current reality? And one of the things that we can do is we can recognize that we have powers that are working against us. And I was actually talking to somebody just yesterday about G.I. Joe. I never watched G.I. Joe when I was a kid, but when I would be at a friend's house and they'd be watching it, I always remember this little phrase at the end. It said, because knowing is half the battle. And really, when you know who your adversary is or you know who your opponent is, you can build a strategy so that you can defend yourself better. And so recognizing the powers that are working against us is an essential first step to reverse those statistics when it comes to health. And then we can also harness the power of our habits to start working for us and not against us. So what is it that's working against us? Okay, so we've got science working against us, we've got a predictable failure pattern working against us, and we've got an obesogenic world. And we're going to break it down a little bit and talk about each one. So in terms of science, okay, our body is wired to eat everything in sight. Okay, if you think about people way back when they couldn't just roll up to a grocery store and buy the eggs, you know, they had to go and hunt and find their food, and when they found their food, they would kind of stock up. Okay, and so our body is wired to eat everything in sight, and it's wired to store energy. Actually, the ability to store fat is one of the body's most important survival mechanisms because that it stores energy for times when you might not have energy sources around. And so it's a wonderful survival mechanism. So that's what our biology kind of working against us, because if we're wired to eat everything in sight and all of a sudden we have this huge banquet of junk food in front of us, guess what we're going to do? We're going to eat everything in sight. And if our body is wired to store everything that we're eating, because it doesn't know if we're going to run out of energy sources, it's going to store that huge banquet that we just ate. So our bodies are working against us. The food industry is definitely working against us because there are people that make a lot of money trying to figure out what is they call it the bliss point. Okay, there is a name for this in the industry. It's the bliss point. It's that point where you're going to want to keep coming back for more. It's basically they're trying to figure out how to make you addicted to the food. Okay, that's really the bottom line. And things like high fructose corn syrup, it really messes with our body's ability to feel full. So when we eat, we don't recognize our body, you know, there's no messages coming to us saying, enough, you've had enough, stop eating. And so you continue eating. So that's where science is really working against us. Traditional failure patterns, what's that all about? Well, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of any fad diet, but things like low carb, high protein, cabbage soup, whatever, pill, whatever, okay? Whenever you start talking low something or high something, that's usually out of balance, and it starts creating cravings in us, okay? For example, our brain literally functions on sugar, okay? It's more dangerous for you to have a low blood sugar than it is for you to have a high blood sugar. The reason for that is because if you don't have any sugar, your brain will stop functioning, okay? And so when you have somebody that goes on an extremely low carb diet, would that be healthy? And so all of a sudden panic signals are going through your body saying, wait a minute, something's wrong. And so usually it causes cravings, it messes with our metabolism. So that's where fad diets don't work. You might lose weight for a little bit, but then you put it right back on. Exercise, you know, I'm so inspired by the stories I see on shows like The Biggest Loser. I'm always inspired when people beat the odds, you know. But one of my biggest pet peeves with The Biggest Loser is that a lot of it is focused on you need to work your butt into the ground to lose this weight off. And actually, it's very true. You need to work your butt into the ground if you want to lose weight by exercise alone, okay? According to the Institute of Medicine, the United States Institute of Medicine, you need to do an average of about 90 minutes of strenuous activity every single day if you want to lose any kind of significant weight. And with everybody being so busy, I mean, how many of us can get in even 30 minutes, much less 90 minutes of hardcore workout? And so it's kind of like a setup for failure, okay? Now, our obesogenic world, which basically means that everywhere you turn, there is temptation for unhealthy living. Okay, you turn on the TV, you walk out the door, you go to the grocery store, you go to a park, everywhere you go, you're smelling hot dogs. It's just everywhere. And so there's seductive, convenient, unhealthy food at an arm's reach. Okay, and our lifestyle now is so much more sedentary than when we had to go out and hunt our food, when we had to go out and plant our food and harvest it. Okay, and so instead of hunting your food and harvesting, you can drive up to a window, you can push a button. You don't even need to crank the window down on most occasions. You push a button, the window comes down, you hand a woman a bill of money or you swipe your card, and you take food. And so really our sedentary lifestyle combined with this convenient, unhealthy food that's available, it adds up to this obesogenic world, which basically means everywhere you turn, you're tempted to be unhealthy. So what can we do about that? Once again, we can't change our biology. We can't change our society, but we can change our choices, which can create habits, okay? And what we want to focus on is empowering choices and not take them away, okay? So what is a habit? A habit is repeated behaviors that end up occurring subconsciously. We talked about my example earlier today where I thought about something, but just my subconscious behavior took over, okay? And habits, they really serve a great purpose because it prevents us from becoming overwhelmed by the stress of always having to make decisions. Deciding every little thing. When we go on autopilot, it allows us to relax a little bit. And these habits or these responses that we have usually happen in response to a trigger or a cue. So for me today, driving off the ramp of the highway, that was a cue to go home. And so that's what I did. I just went home. Parking my car, taking off my seatbelt was a cue that I need to remove the key out of the ignition. So that's what I did. And so when we have the ability to create those automated responses by making a choice first and repeating it enough times to make it automatic, so that when it becomes automatic, it relieves the stress of us having to constantly think. And that's where I believe developing healthy habits is kind of like an insurance policy on, for example, when somebody loses weight, instead of being worried about gaining the weight back, if you're able to master healthy habits, then you're going to be doing things on autopilot, healthy things on autopilot, and the weight should not come back, right? So, let me explain to you guys a little bit about a behavioral chain, what we were talking about just now, a stimulus and an action. The stimulus for me was coming off the ramp, and the action was go home, make a right. So an example for an unhealthy habit would be you're sitting in front of the TV, you're hungry, so you eat popcorn, okay? You do that enough times, and you no longer even need that hunger part anymore. You're in front of the TV, and all of a sudden you need to eat popcorn. Or another really simple example would be attending the movies, okay? You go into the movies, are you really hungry? But you gotta get that bucket of popcorn. And for me, actually, I was never a popcorn fan, but once I walked into that theater, I needed to get the nachos and cheese, and it was like Pavlov's dogs. Or another example for me was I love scrapbooking. And every single time I walked into a scrapbooking store like Michael's or something, on the way out, they have this whole counter of chocolate. And so I would always grab 1 or 2 Linder truffles. And it was amazing how over time, every time I walked into Michael's, I felt like I needed to have a Lindor truffle. And that was a hard habit to break because the behavior chain was in place. I walk into Michael's, I get a Lindor, I walk out, and I eat it in the car. And so then now all of a sudden I have to break that. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how we can break that chain. So what do? First, how do we change a habit? Basically, we need to first identify what is the health that you want and why is it important to you? We talked about that continuum of health, and, identifying where you are and where you want to be is kind of a prerequisite for all of this. So once you decide, okay, this is where I want to be, you can then identify the behaviors that'll help you get what you want, okay? Let's give it another example. Let's say I want to get a degree. I want to become a doctor, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to walk into a school and you're going to say, what is it that I need to do to become a doctor, right? And so this is what we need to do when we're thinking about taking charge of our habits. What is it that you want to accomplish? And now what behaviors do you need to get what you want? Then we kind of need to look back at our current reality and identify which unhealthy habits we have. What are the things we do that are keeping us from having the health or the life that we want, okay? We need to recognize the triggers, replace the reaction to the triggers. So we don't want to just erase a habit. We want to replace it, okay? So the trigger was when I'm coming off the ramp, I need to turn right to go home. What I need to tell myself is every time I come off a ramp, I need to make a left. And so I'm replacing that. And then you repeat it. You have to think about it for a while, but you repeat it consistently enough and enough times until it becomes automatic, where I'm not thinking about it anymore. Once again, I come on that ramp and I make a left, okay? Another thing that helps to change a habit is to shift the perspective. You know, I like to think in terms of a camera, okay? You can zoom into something so tight that you don't even recognize what it is. Or you can zoom out so far that it's so far away you don't know what it is either. You need to have it in the perfect perspective so that you can see what you want to see, okay? And it's the same thing in terms of our health. You can say one of my biggest triggers or weaknesses was tiramisu, okay? And so if there was tiramisu anywhere in a 25-mile radius, I needed to have it. And it wasn't just a little piece, I needed to eat the whole thing, okay? And so when I thought tiramisu, that is all I saw was the tiramisu, was that tunnel vision, okay? Whereas when I step back and I shift my perspective to the tiramisu in light of the health I want to achieve, okay? So I want to run a half marathon. Whatever it is for you, okay? I want to be able to have the endurance to run a half marathon and not have my knees hurting. How is that tiramisu going to help me with that? Or another example is I want to be a good example of health for my children, okay? So when I put it all in perspective, the tiramisu alongside what it is that I ultimately want, all of a sudden the tiramisu doesn't have that big of a pull on me, okay? And then, of course, you want to create an environment that supports your choices because, once again, remember, our body is wired to eat everything in sight, right? So we want to keep things that are not going to support our health out of sight. You want to create an environment that's going to kind of keep you safe from your own biology, okay? So I'd love to hear from you guys. What are some of the unhealthy habits that you know, if you don't want to share one of your own, tell me what some of the unhealthy habits you think are that contribute to our current national statistic of being the number 2 preventable cause of death.
Fast food.
I'm sorry?
Fast food.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Fast food.
Fast food, okay.
I think one is always having to have dessert.
Always having to have dessert, that's a great one. So, okay. Any other thoughts?
Cookie temporary.
I'm sorry?
So we're not saying it's free, but stop with things stayed in touch.
I didn't catch that. Well, you know, let me give you a couple of things that I kind of listed out was, you know, eating directly from a big container, so like a bag of chips, okay? Or always going back for seconds or thirds. Or not making time for exercise, okay? So those are definitely things that, habits that we have that sometimes we don't even recognize as habits. You know, the idea of always having to have dessert. That was one that I hadn't thought of. But every one of us has something. For me, it was, you know, getting a Lindor truffle when I was going to Michael's. And so it's just important to recognize what those are for you. Okay. Now, once we recognize what the unhealthy behavior is, then we need to identify what are the triggers for those behaviors. And there are 2 kinds of triggers. There's internal triggers and there's external triggers. Internal triggers include things like being upset, being stressed, depressed, angry, sad, bored, tired, overworked. I'm sure you've heard of, if you are not one yourself, of emotional eaters. That's me, okay? Any emotion is a great reason for me to eat. It doesn't have to be a negative emotion. Celebration and happiness is another great reason to eat. And so recognizing whatever your internal triggers are key to kind of breaking the chain. Oh, I'm sorry about this. What are some common and external triggers? Things like parties and celebrations, movies, you know, like I was telling you, you go to the movies, you need to have popcorn or nachos, holidays, get-togethers, going out of town, a weekend. Oh, I forgot to put that one in. Weekends are amazing external triggers because all of a sudden you feel like you need to let your hair down and you don't think about things anymore.
Donnie,
Yes.
can you mute the active calls? We're getting feedback.
Yes, let me see here.
Enter 000. ID is not a yes.
Okay. Another very common external trigger is well-meaning relatives. You know, I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, but they'll say something like, I baked your favorite cake. And so what is the response to someone that's loving you with food is to eat it, right? So let's kind of break this down and examine the behavioral chain for, let's say, eating cookies, okay? What are the links to the chain? First of all, you clipped the coupon. You look through, then you're going to go grocery shopping, you look through the coupon box. You bought the cookies. Not only did you take it off the shelf, you put it in your cart, you walked to the front, and you paid for them. Then you place the cookies in front of your cupboard. Then all of a sudden, Sunday comes around and you're bored, nothing to do. You develop the urge to eat, you roam into the kitchen cupboard, and you grab the bag and you eat it straight out of the bag, okay? So this is a chain of events for just a simple action, a simple habit of eating cookies, okay? Now, how can we break the chain? You know, by breaking it down this way, you're able to see all of the steps along the way that you can change something. And if you change it, you need to make that conscious choice to change it, and all of a sudden you can break that chain. So, oh wow. Okay, so the first one is to maybe not click coupons for foods that don't support your health goals, right? Only look for coupons that match your goals, really. Shop from a list. So if you have a list, stick to it and don't deviate from it. If you do buy the cookies, if someone gives them to you or whatever, you can hide them or you can give them away. Don't keep them easily accessible. Plan weekend activities ahead so that if you know that you might be bored, then try to plan around it so that you don't sit around wondering, what am I going to do? Okay, have a couple of activities in your back pocket so that you're not bored. If you do have an urge for something, wait 15 minutes, drink some water, and have a healthy snack instead. And oftentimes that urge will go away. Take a walk, get out of the house. Or if all else fails, you can take one cookie out, put it on a plate, sit at the table with the TV off, nothing else on, and enjoy that one cookie. Be very mindful of it, okay? So these are some ways that you can break the chain at each of the different steps along the way, okay? One technique that Dr. A suggests in his book is stop, challenge, choose. And I don't know if you guys remember the fire safety campaigns from way back when of stop, drop, and roll, okay? So if you think of it in a quick, easy way that way, it may come to your mind at the moment you need it. So the technique is stop, challenge, choose. And so when you have the urge to eat something, stop, Don't act on that behavior, okay? And, take a deep breath, center yourself, recognize that you're experiencing a trigger, or name the feeling. One thing that has helped me a lot is when I find myself thinking, I need to get some froyo, or I need to get some tiramisu. Instead of trying to tell myself, no, you can't have it, what I do is I ask myself, what is the name of what you're feeling? And just the intensity of trying to figure out the name of what I'm feeling distracts me enough that I get over it. Once I recognize that I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling upset, just giving it a name, all of a sudden, I don't have the urge to have the froyo or whatever as much anymore, okay? So stopping is the very first step. Challenge is where you put the whole situation in perspective, like we were talking about before. You want to look at whatever your temptation is. In my case, it was the tiramisu. And what is my ultimate goal, okay? And what is it that I want more? What outcome do I want? If I eat the tiramisu, what kind of outcome am I going to get? And if I don't, what kind of outcome am I going to get? And which one am I going to feel more proud of? Okay, which one do I want more? And then you choose. And this is where the power of choice is so powerful. It is always your choice. And sometimes when people are trying to lose weight and they think they feel deprived, they'll say something like, oh, woe is me, I can't have the tiramisu, And when I think of it in that way, I think, wow, is that, let me see if I'm expressing myself clearly. You can either choose to have control from your mind, say, I choose not to eat the tiramisu because I want to fit into a size 6. I want to be an example for my kids. Or you can allow yourself to be controlled by your temptations, be controlled by your cravings, okay? And when you're controlled, you don't have any power of choice there, okay? So this little exercise, Stop, Challenge, Choose, has been very helpful for a lot of people, and I hope that it will be helpful for you. So in summary, there are many things that are working against us in terms of our health, but we can take control over our own health. We can choose the results we want. We can choose the actions we take, and we can create new habits, okay? If this is something that you've been struggling with, please touch base with the person that invited you to this meeting today, because something that helps a lot is the support. And we would love to help you, empower you to make those choices for yourself. Now, we have this little wristband, Stop, Challenge, Choose, that we would love to give to those of you that are on the call tonight. And so please connect with the person that invited you to make sure they have your address so they can put this in the mail to you, okay? We will be meeting again next week. Excuse me. We will be meeting again next week, same time, same place. We'll put out a link for the meeting, and we're going to be talking about how to set goals and how to create a strategy to meet them. And so I look forward to seeing you all then. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who has a question? No questions?
No, sorry.
All right, guys. Well, you have a great evening, and we will see you again next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Those are very powerful words.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
What's the name of the app? How come it's not showing?